Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's Backyard Forestry, New Jersey's Deer Population Explosion. Word about the NJFA, we're a 501c3 organization. We advocate for all forests in New Jersey by supporting responsible use in science-based forest management, and we are the voice of woodland owners in New Jersey, both public and private. This presentation is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to constitute specific legal, tax, or other advice. No claims, promises, or guarantees are made about its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or suitability. We encourage landowners to consult with their own attorneys, accountants, and foresters for professional advice concerning their woodlands and otherwise. We've been adding a little session on legislative and regulatory as we do these monthly seminars. And this month, we're going to talk a little bit about the Invasive Species Management Act, and that may actually get passed in the end of year change of administration legislative session. And the bill prohibits the sale, distribution, import, export, etc., of certain invasive species and establishes the New Jersey Invasive Species Council. But I wanted to point out that critical to the bill's effectiveness, it goes beyond stemming the tide of importation and distribution. It's the process of identification, control, and eradication. And in New Jersey, the vast majority of invasive species control is occurring on private woodlands, which, under the Farmland Assessment Act, have woodland management or forest stewardship plans which incorporate invasive species control. Implementation of those plans is funded primarily by landowners, and their efforts deserve recognition. So hug your landowner today. Meanwhile, the association just launched its 2026 membership campaign. So if you're enjoying these webinars, we have a lot of regulars who attend. Really appreciate you becoming a member of the association because that funding is important to us going forward throughout the year. So the more folks who join right now ensures our funding for the coming year and for the future. So you can go to njforestry.org and click on Join Us, and we'll be very pleased to have you as a member. And if you're renewing, thank you very much. Tonight's presentation is deer population explosion, but looking at where people hunt and how they hunt. And we always focus on forested land, particularly here. So 40% of New Jersey is forested, and of course has an amazing range of wildlife and a lot of concerns from all sides. But I think it's pretty much recognized that we do have a deer problem in New Jersey, however you want to define it, whether it's by count per square mile or number of car collisions that occur. But tonight we're going to hear from Conservation Officer Alan Sutton. And by the way, in New Jersey, a conservation police officer is very similar to a game warden in other states. Alan, I apologize if I've in any way insulted you on that. But it is an individual responsible for the enforcement of laws concerning fish and wildlife. And tonight we'll focus more on deer hunting and management, but we will also touch on fish and other wildlife. And we're going to have an extensive Q&A following this session with additional panelists. Next month's presentation is on 12/18, and we are very pleased to have as our guest Matthew Olson, PhD. He's an associate professor of environmental science at Stockton University. You may recognize him from previous NJFA webinars and panels that he sat on at our annual meeting. And by the way, if you are looking to attend our annual meeting this coming year, it's March 21st, Saturday. So please mark that on your calendar. We will open registration after the new year. But if you don't know Matt, or if you do know him, you'll know that he's one of the smartest people you will ever meet. He's also a gifted and engaging speaker. He'll be covering building resilience in New Jersey's forests, and he's going to focus, in this case, on shortleaf pine, which is a fire-adapted, wind-resistant, drought-tolerant species, which is perfect for a changing climate. Tonight's guest is Alan Sutton, Conservation Police Officer with Fish and Wildlife. There he is receiving one of his many awards. He has a Bachelor of Wildlife Management. He became a Conservation Police Officer in 2017. He's been recognized several times for his work. In 2021, he was a recipient of the National Wild Turkey Federation Officer of the Year. In 2022, he completed the firearms instructor course at the Morris County Public Safety Academy. In 2024, he received the New Jersey Public Recognition Award for heroism for his role, along with 2 other officers, for extraordinary efforts to locate and rescue a missing person. In 2025, he received the 2024 Officer of the Year Award from New Jersey Fish and Game Council. He's currently assigned to Sussex County and serves as a firearms instructor, Glock armorer, and field training officer. Andy, before we just kick off the presentation, do you want to introduce the other guests that are with us this evening? I will stop my share and turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Alan and I are coming to you from the New Jersey Forestry Association studios, which actually happens to just be my office. So anyway, hey, one of the things we started doing probably well over a year now is soliciting your questions as you're signing up. And you all have been great at submitting questions, but in particular, this meeting, we had more, probably 3 times as many questions as we normally have. So it's super helpful for us as we're kind of walking through these meetings. As we get your questions, we can kind of tweak our presentations and kind of shift right, shift left. But tonight it became very apparent as we were going through the questions this week. I realized that we've got more ground to cover than we can in one webinar. So I'm announcing tonight that this is going to be just part 1. We are going to have part 2 for our backyard forestry in January. So mark your calendar, January 15th, Thursday night. That will be part 2 of this conversation around deer. In light of all the questions, we're going to try to cover what ground we can tonight. But there will be a lot of questions we don't get to. So we will have another shot at this. So if you don't get your question answered tonight, hopefully we'll catch it round 2. As always, the Q&A, you can plug some stuff in there or use the Q&A. Don't use the chat for questions. It makes it easier for us just to look in one location for questions. So if you do have a question, pop it in the Q&A. Also, you'll notice 2 other faces on the screen here. We have a couple other guests from New Jersey Fish and Wildlife, Jodi Powers and Brian Schumm. They're going to be the presenters in January to talk about what they do in their job as wildlife biologists. But they've jumped on here tonight, last minute. I appreciate it. I just asked them a couple days ago if they'd join us to help us with some of the Q&A. So thank you, Jodi and Brian, for being here. Let's see if there's anything else to cover here. Nope, that's it. So I'm gonna get Alan started here. We're gonna share our screen. He's got a PowerPoint, and we will get him kicked off.
All right, so hello everybody. My name is Conservation Police Officer Alan Sutton. I had a very nice entry there from Rich, so I don't have to tell you everything about me. I guess he did that for me. So we'll get right into it. So just like some simple stuff here. It's our mission, right? So like we said, we're game wardens, conservation police officers. New York calls them NCON officers. PA's actually PA game wardens. So the main thing, our main objective, what we do is protect, manage the state's fish and wildlife. We want to maximize the long-term biological, recreational, and economic values to everybody in the state. We essentially want to always have something for people to hunt, fish, trap, things like that to always have in the future. But at the same time, we want to do a lot of educating. We do tons of outreach, all those kinds of things. Basically that's the goal, right? You want to have it for more people to use in the future. Solely the Bureau of Law Enforcement's mission. Enforcing laws, regulations to protect wildlife and its habitat. Some cool old pictures. Everybody loves old pictures. I had to add a few. All right, so our hunting seasons, right? Game laws from when it all started. Kind of cool timeline. So your hunting season in 1820 was established. Your deer was September 1st to January 2nd, which actually hasn't changed all that much in some zones. Your woodcock June 5th, February 1st. That's a bird, grouse. We don't have grouse hunting anymore in New Jersey. Partridge, quail. You have rabbit season, your muskrat season. Things have changed with that too. But law protecting. Okay, so yeah, 1850s when we had the law protecting small harmless birds like songbirds. That's actually it's a whole nother world. The non-game side of what we do is a whole nother world outside of this. So in 1871, that's when we passed the law to actually hire us. But they were fish wardens along with the Delaware River. So wardens had to live in the counties they worked: Hunterdon, Mercer, Burlington, Camden. All what you can see there. So 1892, for the first fish and game protector was hired. So the warden for fish and wildlife enforcement statewide. Also, Fish and Game Commission, Game Council was created as well. Then in 1895, we had 25 game wardens were hired, whopping 25 for the whole state. It's pretty intense, right? 1909, your first hunting license was $1.15. So everybody that says they're expensive now, I mean, I guess they are expensive now because it was $1.15 then. So 1915, you had your first fishing license. Fish and Game Council. This is something that I think is pretty important because this is the people that make a lot of, I guess, the big decisions as to what we do outside of the legislature. So, Fish and Game Council is made of 11 members. They're appointed by the governor. There's 3 farmers, 6 sportsmen, 1 chairman from the Endangered and Non-Game Species Advisory Committee, and 1 person from the general public. They determine the regulations regarding season dates, bag limits, manner and means pursuing wildlife, like how to take and things of that nature. So what do I do on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm a conservation officer. I drive around in a black Ford F-150 that says Conservation Police on the side of it. Daily compliance is really what we do. So checking licenses, you make sure requirements are all met for safety. You check fish sizes, your bag limits. We investigate the things that nobody likes to investigate. Hunting accidents, they happen. It's unfortunate, but it's just part of the game. We'll call them major poaching cases. When I say that, I'm really saying it as far as something that you're working for a while. So you're putting together things to work what you need to get to, whether it be night hunting, the commercialization of wildlife, like the larger scale stuff is really what I'm touching on there. So why do we have laws to protect wildlife, guys, right? Oops, sorry. So it's really the same thing we discussed before. Why do we have laws? It's to make sure that we have them moving forward. We don't want things to go extinct. We don't want, we want to make sure we have it to move forward. So these are just some cool numbers, I thought, which honestly now they could be a little off, but 90,000 people hunt New Jersey, which generates like just about, 298.6 million for the state, so 300 million, give or take. I'm sure it's probably higher than that now. 800,000 people fish in New Jersey. Again, these numbers could be higher at this point, generating 1.4 billion. Fish and Wildlife is self-funded, so like your hunting fishing licenses is what funds us. Taxes don't really do much for us. Watchable wildlife, yep, generating 2.4 billion for the state. That's like your bird watchers, things of that nature, amphibian stuff. Commercial fishing employs 13,000 people, which is pretty cool. 1 billion for the state. That's something you don't have to get a license for, commercial fishing. So requirements to become a conservation police officer. It's not like a regular cop. We do require a 4-year degree in some sort of biology or environmental science. You have to, after you go through like a background investigation like you would anywhere else, and then you would complete a 6-month PTC police academy. And I went through Gloucester County. Now we send all of our recruits to Cape May Academy because it's an in-house place. They stay there. So after that, you successfully complete our warden school, we call it, so Conservation Police Academy. And then you would go through 12 weeks of field training after that. So you're essentially in training for a year before you're out on your own when you sign up to do this. These are some fish numbers, just some other stuff that are kind of, kind of cool to see. Not really the deer side of it. We're going to get to that shortly, but so your trout season, we stock like 600,000 trout annually, 180 trout are released on opening day. And we only stock rainbow trout now because of a disease. And they all come from the Pequest Trout Hatchery in Warren County. Warm water species, we stock a lot of those. That's actually where I started my career, was at the Hackettstown Fish Hatchery. A little shout out to them. So I started there as a seasonal and then worked my way through and ended up here. But they stock all kinds of species: channel catfish, walleye. I mean, it's basically anything that you're going to go fish for every day. They've probably put there, or they're raising to put somewhere else. And fishing license 16 to 70, you're required to have a license. After that and before that, you're free. Small game season, we have a lot of different small game. Touch on it briefly. Rabbit, squirrel, your pheasants, that's what's going on right now. So anybody that's hearing a lot of gunshots is probably because of the pheasant season's going in full swing. We have a woodcock season, fox, coyote, quail just kind of runs with the pheasant. Crow goes later, so that's some later shots you might hear if you're calling saying, why am I hearing gunshots? And then you have some night hunting. You have to have your proper license, and the weapons, are shotguns, muzzleloading rifle, bow and arrow. Waterfowl season, ducks, brant, geese. They require federal documents that you have to have, a little separate than completely different than other things. You don't have to have federal documents for anything but the birds. So deer season, this is what everybody came for, right? So now we'll really get going. So the deer season, you can use your bow, arrow, shotgun, muzzleloading rifle. You register all your deer online, or you could call it in with a number. It's been automated since 2012, which, wow, that's actually crazy to even think about. It's been since 2012. And you can print, now it's really nice. You can print all your stuff out, all your tags. So if you want to go to a zone with a buddy that you don't have, you can print it out the night before, and it's much easier to deal with. Or if you're like most people and you forget till the night before, you can print it out. Like myself sometimes too, it's common. So one of the, some of the things we actually, I guess I could talk about that here, right? Yeah. So one of the things we could, is the questions is the amount of deer in certain areas, right? Like, why is there such a population? Well, it really depends on where you are. So like Bergen County does have a very high deer population because a lot of Bergen County, if not most of it, is a no discharge ordinance, which it comes from the town. If the town wants to make their laws stricter than the states, they always can be. They can just not be more lenient. So if they say there's no discharge in their town, that's up to them to enforce that. We do not. But that would make it so people essentially couldn't hunt, which would cause your deer population to go through the roof, because without the harvest of them, you're going to have that problem. This is actually a picture of a case that I had worked. Kind of neat. It was a guy that was hunting somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. We had info about it. We sat on it. I sat in a blowdown for like 12 hours straight. The guy ended up field dressing the deer. He buried everything to try to hide it. And we ended up catching up with him and wrote him a bunch of tickets, but he had his tree stand hidden. I mean, it's crazy what these guys will go through out there to try to shoot a big buck. It's really crazy. Depredation permits, that's also one of the questions. So depredation permits, you can get them through us very easily. You don't have to have any sort of monetary amount. It all comes. It's really just, if you're a farmer and you have any sort of damage, you apply for the permit. One of us actually will come out for your first time to inspect all the properties to make sure that there is damage and that it's safe. Our biggest thing is safety, because we're literally giving you a gun, a permit to shoot deer at night with a light. We need to make sure there's no houses, things of that nature, because that's what we don't want to happen. We don't want houses shot, people shot, things like that. So it's safety number one. But then as far as years after that, you can apply like January 1 every year. We will essentially get the permit goes through the right process. It gets to us. We'll either reach out to you to meet up again just to make sure nothing's changed, or we'll literally just we'll meet up with you quick to give you the permit issued. You get seals with the permits to possess the meat, but you cannot possess the antlers, which is what this photo is. This was another case that I had worked where the person shot this gigantic buck that everybody was after and tried to keep the antlers. And there's requirements on the permits as to what kind of firearm you can use. The individual did not use the right firearm for this, so he also received summonses for that. But there's there's a lot to the permits. It is pretty, it's strict but lenient at the same time. But there's I know the question I think was monetary value, and that doesn't exist for the depredation permits for deer. Some night deer hunting stuff here. So you cannot have a weapon in the vehicle when you have a light. You can't have anything in the vehicle that you could potentially harvest a deer with or an animal when you're spotlighting at night. It's just a kind of, people will go out after in the evening to look for deer, which is totally legal. But if you have a bow in the car and we pull you over, that's not legal. This is another whole case, kind of cool. You can see the tree stands and the things on the trees. Those are motion detectors. These guys were actually sitting with their crossbows at night with lights on them. It's crazy what people go through to shoot deer, but they were sitting at night. When the motion detectors would go off, they'd shine the deer wherever it was coming from and went right to their phone, and then they would shoot the deer after legal hours. Because you can only hunt for deer, you can hunt half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset. And that's the actual crossbow from one of the individuals that night. You can see the light there mounted on the top. So the non-target impacts, that's something that unfortunately we deal with. It's just part of the nature. If you're going to have a lot of people out with firearms and bows, you're going to deal with houses and unfortunately sometimes hunters getting shot. It's the least favorite thing for us to deal with, but it does happen. We deal with them every year. So if they're convicted if we figure out who they are and they're convicted, most of the time we do find them. It's pretty rare we run into ones that we don't end up solving. It might take a little time, but we usually get there. We put all the pieces together and all that good stuff. You lose your hunting and fishing privileges for 7 years or permanently, depending on the situation. Here's some pictures these are all real, guys. Like, these are actual cases. This is stuff we get called to. So you want to make sure we want to urge you to have people on your property to hunt, but we want to urge you to make sure you're doing it, taking the right channels and making sure people are safe and know where they are. They need to know where everything is when they're on your property. That's all super, super important. Those are buckshot holes from a shotgun. That's a dowel. So we put a dowel in the hole to kind of give us a shot line for a direction of how to work it backwards. Those are all pellet strikes on bushes. So we mark them all, and then everything gets goes on a system, like a mapping system, and then we print it all out and bring it to court. It's called the total station. Basically like drawing a blank, surveying equipment is essentially what it is. So that's kind of my thing with it. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions, which those will probably be, they'll be great, but that's our 24-hour hotlines, the 877 Warren DEP number. That's gonna bring you right to our dispatch. So again, if you see stuff and you want to report it, feel free. The office phone is business hours, but somebody's going to answer if it's during business hours. So, but yeah, thanks again for the time for the short presentation, and I'll be here for all the questions here that we get to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. So I'm going to do a little bit of Q&A here with Alan. Some of these questions came from you all. Some of them are just kind of me thinking out loud here, what I would like to know. So first one for Alan is just to hunt deer in New Jersey. Like, what do you have to do to legally hunt deer? So this is for landowners' benefit to know what hunters need, and for hunters, what do they need?
So all the hunters are required to go through like a hunter safety course to start. Once they have that, they come on your property, or if they're going to come on your property, they're going to need their license for whether it's firearm or bow. They're separate. You can buy them together, but as long as they have them, doesn't matter if you buy which way you get them, as long as you obtain them. So you need your firearms or your archery license, and then there'll be certain seasons that require certain tags. You're going to want to make sure that they have all that stuff, because you don't want to be put in a pinch where we show up to your property because of somebody else there. You want to make sure that these guys do it the right way, and that way everybody gets along. We get along with the landowner gets along with the hunters, everybody's happy, and the deer are harvested, right? That's really the end goal here. So as long as they have all that kind of stuff, that's really, you should be good.
Okay.
Could I ask a question, Andy?
Yeah.
Alan, you do need a letter from the landowner to have, the hunter needs to have a letter on their body.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the other, it's one of our other questions. So yeah, there it is right there. So when you're on private property, this is supplied on our website. We took this off here just before. You have to have some sort of letter on you to say that you're allowed to be there. Because if we check you and we ask, hey, who owns this, or people look at us and say they have no idea. I mean, it's common, but the people that do it the right way will hand you this and say, oh no, this is the landowner. This is their their name. I have permission to be here. All that kind of stuff. But yes, you have to have something written on you if you're on private property to prove you're allowed to be there.
And the other thing that I've experienced is that if you have any close proximity to the adjacent neighbor's home, you have to make sure you meet the clearance distances, obviously, where you set up on the land. And at the same time, I think it's been a practice, at least by experienced hunters, of getting a letter from that person as well.
Yeah. So on the card, actually, it has at the bottom, hunter may hunt within 450 or 150 for both buildings, and you can check yes or no. So that's of their buildings, though, on that property. That does not go on to like an adjacent property. You have to get that from each property owner.
Right.
For sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, while we're kicking that around, let's just talk about posted properties being posted or not posted.
So posted property is a big thing. It's a topic we get a lot. So trespassing for the purpose of hunting, it requires the property to be posted in its entirety with no less than 10 signs. I think it's 10 signs, visible signs, 10, I think it's 10 visible signs per linear mile, I think is how it's written. I always tell people, just make it so if you're standing at one sign and you look left and you look right, you see more posted signs, right? We don't want the people to say, oh, I didn't see a sign, because that's what they do. It's just that simple. So one of the things is make sure that if you don't want people that on your property that you don't allow there, you have to make sure it's posted with the name of the leasee or occupant of the whoever owns it or is leasing the property. Yeah, that's.
And if it's not posted,
and if it's so that side of it. If it's not posted, we actually, if somebody were to call and say they're not allowed to be there, we actually cannot charge them the first time they're on the property. It has to be posted by law to be charged. If they're warned the first time, so if we came and we said, hey, listen, property owner says you can't be here, make sure you don't be caught here again. Now, the next time, if they're caught there, whether the property is posted or not, it doesn't matter because they've been warned. That's how that works.
And that warning has to come from you, or
not
it can
necessarily.
come from the landowner?
It can come from the landowner. It can come from a regular police department, just somebody that is either of law enforcement or owns the property.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to the licenses and permits. How does that different for like a farmer? A landowner who owns a farm, do they have to have a license? How does all that work?
So yes, they do, but certain times a year they don't. Jodi might be able to even answer some of that, but there's so farmers are definitely allowed to do a lot more than just your regular Joe, I guess we'll say. They can get all their stuff for free if they qualify for farmer permits. If you have a certain amount of acreage, you can qualify, and then you fill out an application, and we go through it, make sure it all checks out, and then you'll get essentially you become a farmer in our system, and then you'll get free stuff. With that, your tags kind of change or can, because you'll end up using some that we give in our compendium, but it does differ. I guess if it would have to be it definitely differs, but it's kind of hard to talk about without the individual person, I guess you would say. It kind of varies from person to person.
All right, so this was a question I had that I think would be, we had a lot of questions come in from folks about extending deer season, adding more permits, letting people kill more deer. So a question I had was, it obviously varies across the state, what zone you're in, things like that, but how many deer could a hunter on average legally harvest going kind of through the seasons?
I mean, it does depend on where you are. Certain zones you're allowed to shoot unlimited antlerless deer. I mean, unlimited antlerless deer. So you have fall bow, there's one season, right? Then you have your permit archery, there's another. You have your 6-day firearm, which that's bucks only. That's a little different, but in most of the state. Did that actually? There's still some down south, right, Jody? You can still shoot does during 6 day.
Some zones you can shoot during 6 day.
There's none up here, but I think there's still some.
Yeah,
Well, there might be zone 8 still, maybe down that way even still can.
yeah. If you
Yeah.
have your antlerless zone permit, you can shoot
Yeah.
antlerless deer during 6 day.
Yeah,
But
so
the
you can even
6 day
continue to shoot them during that season.
Yeah.
It's basically endless. The amount of antlerless deer you can shoot in the state is crazy. You're never going to find that anywhere else, and you're never going to find that amount of deer for how much the license is. It's impossible. I hunt other states, and I'm telling you, it's not happening. There's just no way. I couldn't even actually put like a number, but because it's unlimited in most of it. You know, I mean, like where we are right now, it's 9. It's 9 per season. But again, that changes per zone. So you'd really have to know where you're going to be to come up with that number.
Got it.
Andy,
Yep.
can I just jump in? One thing that wanted to go back to the landowner issue. The right of retrieval exists in other states, but not in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's actually
could you explain that, Alan?
Yeah, that's good, Rich. So in New Jersey, if you shoot a deer and it goes on somebody else's property, you have to obtain permission to go get that deer. There's a lot of people that think they can call the game warden and we can show up and go get their deer. That is a complete wise tale. We can try to convince the landowner to allow it if they're uncomfortable, or maybe sometimes they might be more comfortable like with us going. But you also have to understand that if you call in those situations, that there's only like 50 of us in the entire state. So getting one of us to be able to go with you at that time it just might not happen.
That still doesn't grant permission. You still need the permission of the landowner.
Yeah, I would even have to get it. So if the landowner looked at me and said, "No, I don't want any of you here," that's the end of the story. Now, the only thing the caveat with that is that landowner can also not touch that deer. So if they touch it, they took possession, and there's a possession charge in New Jersey. So if they take possession to move the deer, we can then come back and charge them for touching your deer or touching the deer. Not that we've ever done that, but it's a thing. Yes. So usually in the situations, there's been times where I have called or I've never actually gone. I've called the landowner that said no and explained to them, listen, like you can't move the deer out of your yard. So it's better off if you just allow the hunter to go get it. They move it and they're out of your hair for the rest of the time. And hopefully this doesn't happen again. And usually when you explain to them that they can't touch it either, they tend to want it gone because they don't want it to smell.
Yeah. All right, couple more here for Alan before we get to the big list. Okay, I think we already said what should a landowner do? Can you baiting deer?
Yeah, so baiting deer in New Jersey, you can bait. The state allows you to bait. If there's any baiting regulations, it's going to come from like towns or counties. They can make their own ordinances if they please to not allow baiting. But as far as in the state, we allow baiting for deer. I mean, you can bait any animal. There's other regulations outside of that, but deer, we'll stick with deer for tonight. Yes, we allow baiting for deer. So,
okay. Last question, and I'll let Alan kind of answer it first, but this may be Jodi and Brian. You can jump in. Rich, you can jump in. So we're one of the things we want to encourage landowners to do is to allow hunters to be on their property, but we obviously want to make sure that that's done safely, legally, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the big questions that will come up is always liability, insurance, all those things. So Alan, maybe just kind of quick, you see hunting clubs and different things. What do you see as important?
So most like hunting clubs that we run into, even individual people for that matter. In fact, for years I had it. I don't anymore, but I did for many years when I was part of a hunting club. You can acquire your own like hunting insurance through like the Sportsman's Federation and things like that. It's like $100 or $75 a year to become a member, and you're insured when you become the member. Most landowners definitely like it because it covered, at that point you're covered on their property, so they're not liable for anything that might happen to you. It's a great thing to have. I encourage any hunter that's hunting on any sort of, you know, private property to have it, because it covers both sides. You know, it's really good. I think it's a great thing to have. We see it often. It's definitely becoming more popular actually now. I've been on for like 8 years, so I'd say in the last like 4, it's probably, I've definitely noticed it more. In fact, guys will even like show it to me when I check them, which I thought was kind of, you know, interesting, because I mean, not that I don't care about it, but at the same token, it's not part of my inspection. You know, like I'm not checking for insurance policies when I'm checking their hunting licenses. But yeah, I would say there's some other ones too. You had some written down, like NRA is one, the Woodland Owner Association. You said you can get it through. So there's different, you know, there's different avenues to get it. But I would definitely urge you, if you're on like some sort of private, you know, larger private property. I mean, even somebody's 10 acres, if you're hunting it, it doesn't hurt for the $100 a year. Why would you not? You know, it's kind of silly not to.
But I would point out that I think it's very important for a landowner to understand the policies from 2 perspectives. One being, is it a policy issued to the landowner, or is it a policy issued to the hunter, and who's covered under those policies and for what acts and conditions? And landowners should be cautious to make sure that they're covered for land conditions, not just the acts of the hunter, because the hunters could get injured on your lands. I personally, when people come on my property for any reason, I get a full release from them signed, even in addition to anything they might provide in terms of insurance. So there, you can belt, I think belt and braces, as they say, belt and suspenders is important in this. It's not very expensive to get a landowner's policy and for the hunter to have a policy, and also to make sure you have releases and all those things in effect to do it properly. And perhaps we could talk a little bit about the Landowner Liability Act, if you wouldn't mind, Jodi and Brian.
Yeah, so first, I'm Jodi Powers. I'm a supervising biologist with Fish and Wildlife, deer project leader, and I've been with the agency for 30 years. I hate to say it, but I have been. And Brian Schumm is the deer outreach biologist. It was a new position that was created like 3 or 4 years ago, because the deer project was getting overrun with requests to come out and speak about deer management and how to, you know, formulate deer management plans. So that position was created, and Brian is in charge of that program. And he mainly deals with the ag community and municipalities in like urban, suburban areas. So as far as the Landowner Liability Act, it was an act that basically protects the landowner from allowing recreational hunters on their recreational, you know, activities, which hunting is part of, on their property. And it prevents them from being liable for any injury that might occur in that act. However, if the landowner knows of a possible, you know, a gopher hole, or, you know, well that is not covered or whatever, if they know that and they don't tell the hunter that, then they would be liable. But any other little, you know, accident or anything, they wouldn't be, you know, held liable for any of that.
Andy,
All right.
Andy, could you
Yeah.
grab a quick look at the Q&A? Did you?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here. Alan and I were just kind of blowing through it really quick.
Can we answer the one that's early on? It was just interesting to me, the track.
Yeah, so we do offer those. Yeah, we still have those. We have track chairs for like disabled people. Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I don't know.
I really was not aware of that, and that's very, very cool. And
Yeah.
those would be obtained through what office?
I would call
believe-
it the region office to start.
Yeah, and I believe it's scheduled through the Hunter Ed
Hunter Ed, right?
group.
I think.
Yeah.
I think you're
Excellent.
right, Jodi.
Yep.
Okay. It's very cool.
Okay, just a clarification. I think we talked about this, but we showed you that form that's in the back of the compendium, the landowner form. And this person was saying doesn't have to be that
No.
form exactly.
No,
Correct.
it can be.
Yeah.
It just has to something that mimics that. It doesn't have to be exactly that. That's just one that we provide for you to have.
Another one is the letter to hunt property required if you have a lease, a hunting lease. I guess you'd have a piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean,
Does you have a lease?
yeah, you'd have the lease. You'd have some sort of lease agreement, I would assume. But if not, I would make sure I would still have something, yes.
Okay.
If you don't own the property, you should have something in writing.
Okay. I'm gonna tee up Jodi. I think I told her, set her up for this a little bit. So again, part two of this presentation, Jodi and Brian are gonna really get into the weeds. Sorry, we're just reading questions that make us laugh, but they're gonna get kind of do a deep dive in part two on populations and where more deer are, less deer are. But just a very general question kind of leads into Jodi maybe just giving us a quick overview of this conversation around deer population. So, is there a target population for deer in New Jersey? What is kind of the current population size?
Right. So there isn't a target. Typically in New Jersey, in the biology world, it's like cultural carrying capacity versus biological carrying capacity, right? So biological carrying capacity is in general terms the number of deer that the landscape can support for a healthy herd. Cultural carrying capacity is the number of deer that residents, towns, landowners, farmers are willing to tolerate. In a lot of places in New Jersey, it's more of a cultural carrying capacity. So there isn't a magic number that anybody, is trying to get to. It's just the level that negative interactions are reduced while still allowing and having enough deer for hunters, because we're trying to manage, we don't manage deer specifically for hunters. We don't manage deer specifically for farmers. It's an all-encompassing goal. So we're managing for hunters, farmers, recreation, wildlife viewers, horticulturists, nursery owners, people driving through the state, all of those, go into why and how we're managing deer. As far as the statewide population, it's about 174,000, but our estimate is based on hunter harvest. So it's based on how many deer are being harvested per year. So clearly in areas where there is no hunting going on, the density is going to be higher than it is in other areas where there is hunting. So it varies greatly across the state.
Got it. So when you're back in a couple of months, Jodi, I'm assuming your all's presentation, you've got some maps, you've got some stats, all that kind of stuff. We'll kind of
Yeah.
kick around at that point. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into that because I'm sure it gets.
But Andy, can we just turn it around a little bit? Because we did talk earlier before that we started just about total harvest and harvest trends in the state.
Yep.
I think people will be very interested in some global analysis of that.
Yep. So, we've been tracking, I think, hunters had to report their harvest, I think, all the way back to the 70s.
Yep.
It used to be a card that you would just mail in. And then we had physical check stations where every hunter had to bring their deer to a physical check stations. And those were usually like sportsman shops, delis, gas stations. And they had to fill out a piece of paper, and then we collected them and entered them into the computer. And like Officer Sutton said, I think in like the 2012s, early 2010s, we went to an automated system. So basically the hunter is reporting that deer for us, electronically or on the phone. So, the harvest, the statewide harvest has varied greatly over the years. In the early, 2000s, we were hitting like 70,000. And then it varies year by year for a number of factors, which we can talk about in the next session. But it is trending down. And, we had a bump during COVID because there was a lot of people out of work. So they had a lot of time on their hands, and we did see a bump in the harvest that year. And it's gone down a little bit since then. We're heading almost to what the pre-COVID numbers were. But it fluctuates, but it's around, 40, 45, 50,000 a year. Because of our regulations, the buck harvest really hasn't changed because of regulations throughout time. But the antlerless harvest has changed throughout time because if you want to reduce the harvest, you want to shoot more antlerless deer. And that tends to be the fluctuations in that tend to be regulation driven, where if we, I think in the early 2000s, we had an buck regulation. So every hunter had to shoot an antlerless deer before they could shoot a buck. So there was a large number and percentage of the harvest that were antlerless. But that does fluctuate, but it is more than the buck harvest. So we are shooting more antlerless deer typically year to year than we are shooting bucks. And that's like a general,
Yeah, and I
discussion.
just have the chart in front of me so I could help out. The
Yeah.
antlerless deer, you were referred back to 2000, was like almost 54,000 and change.
Yep.
And then in 2023, it was just under 20,000.
Yep.
Huge delta there. The
Yep.
antlered has been fairly stable since like 2005, 2004.
Yep.
It was
'Cause we
higher
haven't-
prior to that, but
Yeah, we don't tend to make a lot of changes in the number of bucks that are allowed from year to year to be harvested.
But-
And the big drop in the antlerless was, like I said, we had earn a buck for every season for a number of years,
Yep.
and that drove the population down as a whole. But then we backed off on that regulation, which is why then you saw that big drop in the antlerless because we weren't requiring hunters to shoot an antlerless before they could shoot.
right. The total numbers look like they're about less than 50% of what they were in 2000.
Yep.
So when we were talking earlier, we were talking about it's not necessarily that the population has grown, but the taking of deer has dropped, leaving a larger net population.
Right. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is we're losing the number of hunters, every year. It's just a loss of tradition. There's less kids coming in because there's other activities, sports, video games, that whole thing. We're losing the tradition. It's coming back a little bit. It's bouncing back a little bit. But then time, we did a survey a couple of years ago in preparation for making some major changes in our deer regulations, and we wanted to know, why you're not shooting deer, and a lot of it's time.
Yeah,
Or
what we also, I think I went to the presentations when there were revisions being proposed
yep,
a few years back,
yep,
and bow hunting was really taking off when they
yes.
were making those presentations. It was becoming a new art, like resurrected art that
Yeah,
people were very interested in.
Yeah, and then part of the reason for that, we had three major changes for the archery seasons. One is we allowed crossbow across the board. It used to only be for someone that had an injury or a disabled person, but now crossbows are allowed across the board. We have Sunday hunting, bow hunting, that's allowed on our wildlife management areas and private properties. And then that's when we reduced the safety zone for archery seasons from 450 to 150. So those three things really saw a spike in people using bows. And license sales is decreasing, firearm is decreasing, but archery license and permits are on the rise too.
Thank you.
So there was a stat here somebody brought up that I didn't catch it, but correct this if it's wrong. They said 70,000 harvested deer, a population of 174,000. That seems to be a large percentage of the herd. Is this, they were just questioning, is that accurate? Like, is that right? Was that what we just said?
Well, there was 70,000 shot in like the early 2000s. Last year it was 39,000.
Okay. And a
Um,
population of 175,000, is that still?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
But I
cool.
mean, when our population estimate, it's complex because it's based on hunter harvest, but there's also we're punching numbers into like a program and it's giving us a number. But it's also like the percentage of that harvest, and Brian can go into this more, but it's the percentage of the harvest that is adult bucks. Like there's a percentage there that sometimes then influences what that estimate is. So if you see a lot of like fluctuation in the harvest, but also the makeup of the harvest, the male versus female, the antlered bucks, the adult bucks versus, smaller bucks, all of that gets put in. So there is fluctuations. But that's the estimate that we got for 24.
Okay.
Yes.
Andy, we had a bunch of questions. Actually, it was a little off topic, but on topic about cars and accidents occurring. I looked at the stats, some interesting numbers. Are you familiar with those, Jodi or Brian? Or
Yeah, so we don't track the number of deer that are killed every year in New Jersey by cars. And typically, the number that we get as a statewide number comes from State Farm Insurance Company,
Yeah.
and they put out stats yearly for every state. But those numbers are only claims. So
right.
a lot of people hit a deer and they don't file the claim. But it's typically, I think I looked at it back in, I think the last one I had was, I think 2018 or something, and it's about 28,000 a year that
There's
they're
a range. The ranges, the estimates are very wide reaching. I
Yep,
found ones that said 15,000, others that said 25, 28. The other
exactly.
thing that's happening is, and one of the questions was, what's the cost to the state of that, trying to put in perspective the deer problem.
And probably that State Farm report probably goes into what that cost is. But you
What I found
also,
was the average deer contact is about $6,000 now,
yeah, it's a
mostly
lot.
due to the complex sensor systems
Yep,
on car bumpers and camera
exactly.
systems.
Yep,
And it's just skyrocketed. It's gone up by 50% or something in 2 years or 3 years as
right.
new cars come online that have more electronics in them. So we're looking at $100 million to $200 million problem in the
Yeah,
state that
yeah,
actually is coming back in a large measure on the people who own cars and pay for insurance.
right.
Um,
And that number, again, is only the ones that file the claim. So
yeah,
there's a lot of people that don't. And then even if you try to track the number of deer that are actually getting picked up on the roadways,
you can't.
that's always not accurate either, because
No,
not every deer dies right on the road. They tend to, run into the woods and they'll die, and
absolutely.
those aren't being counted. So we almost sometimes say like that number can be doubled. That's the
Mhm.
number of deer that are actually dying from getting hit by a car.
Right, but it's a good number anyway for an order of magnitude.
Yep,
Somewhere in that 25,000 range
yeah,
probably is
yep,
accurate when you take the ranges and look at those that don't report. But it's a big,
exactly.
big number and a huge amount of aggregate cost.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys are laughing at a question. What are you seeing?
No, not laughing.
Okay.
Just smirking. How many deer? I thought it was a good question. How many deer are killed on the farmer degradation permits? Do you have stats on that?
Yeah, so I think last year it was, I'm gonna say it was about 1,700. Brian, you remember we just did it. We just had the Farm Bureau convention on Monday, this past Monday.
Only
And
1,700.
last year was 1,700. And
Okay,
it
and that
it it ranges about that, like 12 to 17 a year.
okay, and that's
And we're
added into your harvest number.
So that's separate. We're not actually,
Separate.
we don't add that into the annual number.
Okay.
And there's probably about, on average, like, well, Officer Sutton probably knows too, but there's probably about 300 to 350 depredation permits that get issued statewide every year.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds
Yeah,
right. I would think so, just from
yeah,
all the ones that I see in the northern region.
right.
I would think it's probably worse as
Yeah,
you go lower. So
yep,
yeah, I feel like the depredation permits work well, but they only work well for a little while, and then the deer run away because they know that you're coming. So they
right.
work good in the beginning when you first get your permit.
Yep,
It seems like they kind of dissipate, which that's probably why the number might be a little lower than some might think.
yep.
And it's a lot of work to be on a depredation permit.
It is a lot of work.
You're going out in the middle of the night. It's a full-time job.
Yeah,
It's not it's not easy. That's for
yeah,
sure. These guys are dedicating a lot of time for the farmers to really
yeah,
get nothing in return other than some deer meat.
right.
So
Andy,
On the
could you perhaps address from a forester's perspective uh, methods of protecting property from deer, if possible, if it's possible, or is it impossible?
Sure, yeah. There's many methods to protect your trees from deer browse in particular. So smaller trees we're talking about. Hunting is one of them. I would encourage you, if you're not a hunter and you own land, I would encourage you to allow someone to hunt your property, even if they don't People think like, oh, but they only shot one deer this year. Just the presence of somebody on your property putting some pressure on the deer is going to maybe at least move them somewhere else. They're still around, but they're moving somewhere else. You can, people know of deer fencing, extremely expensive to put up, like a deer exclosure, very expensive, very uncommon for people to do it. You can do it if you have the resources to do it. And there are programs through the USDA and through New Jersey Department of Ag, I guess it is. They've got some funding for deer fencing. And then you get down to like individual tree shelters where you're sheltering the trees from deer browse, which again it's very time consuming to put up the shelters. You've got to check on them, make sure they're still in place. Deer can knock them off, bear can knock them off. So there's methods to do that. But I think, pressure from hunters is certainly helpful. There was a question, Rich, about, and I think one of you all can answer this, degradation permit. So you have your property is forested. You're in farm assessment, you've got a forestry plan. Are you able to apply for a degradation permit, or is that just, okay, Jodi, I'll let you answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, Christmas tree farms can,
Yeah.
and nurseries can.
Not
Um,
not just the
but-
forest plan though.
Right. So, or like a farmer that, and I think the requirement is you have to have at least like sell $500 worth of whatever to be able, and it has to be standing crop. But that's all legislative. So it's the depredation permit is a statute, and it's legislative, and it's worded that it's only standing crop. So forestry is not included. Stewardship programs are not included. Like the maple sugar industry, and you're trying to replant maple trees, that's not included. So that's something, and I know there was a question about how, you guys can help like push forward some legislation. That would be one of them. I know the Department of Ag and the Farm Bureau has added forestry practices into what they consider agriculture, but as far as a depredation permit, it's not considered. So that's something that has to be changed legislatively to be able to have, a stewardship program or a forestry program, covered by a depredation permit. So it's out of our hands, and that would have to be a legislative change, and we can't lobby for that. It would have to come from, your group or, Department of Ag or the Farm Bureau.
So
Got
Andy,
it.
could we briefly touch on alternative methods that at least are in discussion to tease the next meeting? Alternative methods of deer population management, science-based
Yep,
management methods. I mean, there were a bunch of questions about sterilization methods
Yep.
and how they work, etc.
yep. So, one of the questions that I saw that this comes up all the time is, can we put birth control in bait or mineral licks or any of that? And the answer is no. And the reason for that is, you would have non-target species also eating that bait or feed. So you're going to be affecting other species. You're going to be affecting birds, raccoons, possums, coyotes, whatever else would be eating that, which would have negative effects on those populations. In addition, you could have a deer that eats that, and maybe you're not allowing hunting on your property, but then that deer, they don't abide by, municipal boundaries, it could go into an area where it could be hunted and is harvested, and then that meat is fed to your child or your family, and that would have a negative impact on that, obviously. So just putting, the sterilization drugs in feed is not an option. We also get a lot of questions about, can we trap and transfer? So can we trap the deer and move it somewhere else? And that we currently don't allow that because for one reason, there's nowhere else in New Jersey that will take more deer. The other thing is there's diseases that you don't want to have the potential to spread. Deer are a very high stress animal, and typically sometimes when you move a deer, they stress out a lot and they could die down the road by something called capture myopathy. And then they also don't know their surroundings, and then they tend to run around, and then they would get hit by a car because they don't know their surroundings. So even though it's considered non-lethal, the end result could be lethal. So we don't trap and transfer anymore in New Jersey. And for CWD regulations, we're restricting the movement of live cervids around the state. As far as sterilization, such as ovarectomies or sterilizations of males, there's been a lot of studies around the world. A lot of them have been done on closed populations, either islands or fenced areas, and there has been limited success on a closed population. But there hasn't been proven to be a lot of success on open populations where you're having deer move in and out of an area. Because you're not going to have 100% rate of sterilization on either the males or the females. But you know, there have been a couple applications that would require a separate application. It's called a community-based application, as well as an application to inhibit the wildlife reproduction. That would be an application that would come to us as an agency, and then it gets presented to the Fish and Game Council, who's our, authority board. But you have to be able to prove a bunch of things. One of them is success. You have to be able to prove that you were going to have a limited success in that, program. But that we can get more in depth in that in the second part of this webinar series. Yeah.
It was a series now. I like it.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
I think it's up for part 3 now. Yeah. So Jodi and Brian, I guess I'm just kind of synthesizing several questions that have come in, and we've talked about this like overpopulation idea, and kind of putting you on the spot. If you had to like boil it down to the areas where the overpopulation exists, like if we talk about Bergen County, Morris County, Hunterdon, where we're seeing these huge deer populations, what would you say are like the contributing factors to that? If you could kind of go, not in any order necessarily, but here are the 2 or 3 things that are causing this to happen.
Right. So, and Brian, you can chime in whenever you want, believe me. The areas that we're seeing it now are, yeah, you hit it right on those. The Western Bergen County area, because there's no management going on in that area right now other than cars. So
most of the towns are have a no discharge ordinance and don't even want you to.
Exactly. And yep. And we've been working, I mean, like I said, I've been here for 30 years, and I'm going to say 20 of those years we've been working with Bergen County to try to get some movement. Certain areas of Passaic County, very, not a whole lot of deer management going on. But it depends on the habitat too, and access has always been the key to deer management. You have to have access to these large tract of lands, whether it's county parks, municipal parks. Access has always been the issue to try to, get in there to remove these deer. And, hunting really is the most successful and I'm losing my word, Brian. What is it? Efficient way to reduce deer populations.
Well, it certainly also has what appears to be the least conflicting with other issues, like you talked about, the other animals being affected by what I'll call just poisons, if you want to use that word, but
Yeah.
or any kind of chemicals that are used or anything of that nature, all have a downstream effect that we have to be very concerned about. Now, I know that one of the parallels to hunting was to find a market for deer in New Jersey, and that's been a huge challenge, trying to find butchers who are willing to accept deer and actually qualified to assess the deer that is brought in.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the other major things is even where we do have access, you know, hunters are, you know, stopping, even though we have unlimited bag limits in a large part of the state, you know, hunters are stopping at 1, 2, 3 deer, because they filled their freezers, they've given their friends and family that wanted the meat, and then, you know, there's nowhere else to do it. So we, you know, there is a venison donation program that, you know, allows hunters that don't want these additional deer, you know, we're trying to incentivize and encourage each hunter to harvest more deer. And this is not just a problem in New Jersey. I mean, this is a Northeast problem, and it's almost a countrywide problem that, you know, we're just having a really hard time meeting antlerless goals to really drive these populations down. So, you know, the venison donation program is one. You know, paying for, you know, bait is another one. And the commercialization of the venison always comes up. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. That would be a legislative change. And nobody's been able to show that there's actually a market for it, that there's actually people that want to buy venison. I know in other states they have venison farms, deer farms, and it's basically like a livestock operation. I don't anticipate that happening in New Jersey. You know, I'm not going to say it's not, but that would all be legislative changes. Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, if you want to jump in.
Not a ton on the commercialization of deer. I mean, we certainly have some hesitancy, knowing that, you know, deer management's a very short history. If you go back, you know, we've been talking since about the 90s, you know, on the topic of this quote unquote explosion. But if you go back another 40 or so years, there's people that are listening to this that can remember when they never ever would have seen a deer in their town. And that was because of market hunting. So I will say that there's probably some hesitancy from some people that remember that far back with the idea of commercialization. But like Jodi said, there are like Canadian provinces that have legalized it in some capacity. There are some other, I believe that there even might be other states that have legalized it and the commercial sale of wild venison. And I think, Jodi, your point that we already have sale of captive venison where they can really maximize the fitness of those deer, alter the diet of those deer to really maximize the taste of those deer produced on those properties. And it's still not something that, you know, a bunch of people are going to restaurants seeing. We're not really seeing that big market for it. So yeah, our current anticipation is that that's not going to be the silver bullet, even if that did make it through legislation.
Yeah, I think there's a more chance of success to incentivize the harvest of deer, whether it's, you know, these programs that provide the bait, they're paying for the butchering so that they can, you know, donate, you know, the venison. Like we have some municipal programs that all of the deer, the municipality is requiring that all of the deer be donated to local food banks. And they're paying for that. They're covering that cost.
There's a lot of
Have those been
definition
successful?
permits to do the same
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that came to us during the week was how to incentivize landowners to open up their property to hunting. So we talked about this earlier. All we could come up with was money.
Right.
But is there, like Jodi and Brian, you all have been, you know, probably talking about this stuff, thinking about this stuff for a long time. How do you move a landowner who is against hunting on their property towards accepting that as a reasonable, you know, there's many reasons why somebody wouldn't want somebody to hunt on their property, but what have you seen, I guess, or what are your thoughts to how can we encourage landowners in that way?
Yeah, so that, you know, the individual private landowners it's a huge piece of the puzzle that we're just getting into now. Like we were focusing on county properties, county park properties, municipal properties. So the private landowner is a huge piece because I think like it's like I don't know, like 3/4 of the state are held in private,
It's
ownership.
it's a large amount
It,
for sure.
it's really big.
Mhm.
So that's a huge piece. So, and I think it's education. I think it's education. I think that we have to change the perception of an opinion of what a hunter is. It's, there used to be, oh, they're beer guzzling, gung slinging, and that's not the case. They are educated. Hunters were the first conservationists. They want to conserve, um, the landscape. And I think it's just education. I don't know how to incentivize. I don't, yeah, paying. I don't, and I don't know who's going to pay it.
I mean, landowners that, I guess you could say landowners that have enough property that they could monetarily get something from as on the lease side of it. I mean,
Yeah, they
have
could.
something like
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah, they could. I mean, there's farmers that lease, as you know, there's
Yeah.
farmers that lease their property out to hunt clubs and individuals during the regular hunt season, and then they wrap it up with a depredation permit.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, you could convince the landowners how delicious the venison is, and then give them some venison.
What, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are hunters that do that. Like, hey, let me hunt your property and I'll give you as many deer, I'll butcher it and give you as much, venison as you want.
Yeah.
And I think, they also have to know that it is, I mean, there are accidents that happen, but there's very few hunter, non-hunter accidents. Most hunting accidents are either self-inflicted or another hunter in their party is injured. And a lot of them are small game, right?
Yes. Yes.
Most of them are small
Completely.
game accidents. There's not, there's not that many hunting accidents that happen during deer. There are, but it's small. Hunting's a
I
very
think your point
safe,
is well taken, though. I mean,
Yeah.
people have an image in their head,
right,
and to dispel that, I mean, we rate Uber drivers. Maybe we could rate hunters,
right.
and
Yeah,
and say, has a person taken the safety course? Have they taken a refresher course? Have they, hunted elsewhere with good reviews? I mean,
right.
it sounds a little odd, but certainly I think it would help people say, I'm a registered hunter, and I have these qualifications, and I have 5 properties that I've hunted,
Yep.
and here are the reviews from those landowners.
Right. And it's also the perception of shooting antlerless deer because, there's a whole generations of hunters, back in the day that didn't want to shoot antlerless deer because they
Yep.
were shooting next year's buck. So that's another perception that you have to encourage these hunters to shoot the antlerless deer. And then if you can find hunters that are willing to do that, that's who you really want on some of these properties.
Yeah.
So in some of these, I'm learning as I'm listening here and talking to Alan. But so these counties and or townships will have non-discharge regulations that the
Mhm.
state cannot supersede.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
We
towns
can
and counties
super,
can make it stricter than us, but it can never be more lenient.
right.
Okay.
So we can so if like a state wildlife, wildlife management area, which is property that's managed by Fish and Wildlife. State property can supersede county and municipal ordinances because it's state property.
Mm-hmm.
And county, even though it's, you have a couple of municipalities on a county piece of property, they can supersede that local ordinance. But we can't force hunters or force a municipality to open their property without changing their ordinance.
Got it. And
And
non-discharge of firearms, I was just asking Alan, let you explain, like,
Yeah.
they can also qualify what is a firearm.
Yeah, if they don't want bows, they could say it's bows or firearms. It's really it all goes to the town.
Okay.
If that's where they want to, if they make their rules and regs in an ordinance, just like we make our rules and regs
Yeah.
in either statutorily or the game code.
yeah, sometimes if it says no firearms, you sometimes you can have an archery But a
Mhm.
lot of towns have a no weapon discharge, and in that case, the bow falls under that.
There was a time where there was like a no discharge, and then like the gray area of the bow started, and then they changed it to a no weapons, so that way
Right.
they covered it entirely.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And they even use noise ordinances have been adjusted to effectuate no discharge in essence. So we see that. I've seen it come and go in towns. Alan, question here says, can you use dogs to hunt deer?
Nope. Nope. Not allowed. No deer dogging in the state of New Jersey.
You know, they used to be, actually, there was a huge case down in Virginia where they were allowed to retrieve dogs chasing deer, but not actually. So they used that as an excuse to enter people's property.
So
That I was chasing my dog, not the deer. So it leads to a lot of problems. So it's the simple answer is no, because it's a very complex scenario.
yeah, not good.
So Jodi, just kind of piggybacking on that whole non-discharge of firearms. Again, I'm just asking questions to learn. So some of the education, would you say at the municipal level is like the environmental councils, or who, if we could encourage people to encourage hunting on town land, would it be the environmental councils who could be educated and informed about these things?
Yeah, and Brian, if you want to go in, this is what Brian's doing now. But yeah, typically, just real quick, I'll go through like the thing, and then he can do it. So typically, we get called from residents complaining that there's too many deer. We can't solicit or start the conversation. Like we can't call up the mayor and say, hey, we want to have hunting in your township. So they kind of have to put the pressure on their elected officials, and then they'll call us, and then we'll have a general meeting. And a lot of times it does come from the environmental commission, because a lot of the driving force is forest health, right? Because everybody's doing a great job preserving open space, but they preserve it and then they're doing nothing to manage it. So that's where it starts. And then we also recommend that they, have like a wildlife committee. It used to be just a deer committee, but there's also other wildlife that they're having issues with, whether it's coyotes or turkeys or whatever. So, start a wildlife committee, and then that's how the conversation starts. And then if Brian wants to, further explain that, or if needed, or,
Yeah. Happy to. I think it goes hand in hand with the private landowner discussion, though it's just much easier to reach local governments and these environmental commissions. But ultimately, I think the messaging is pretty simple. We've seen a real big uptick in interest in deer management because of our forest health. Deer are, indirectly linked, but closely linked. Deer overbrowsing leading to forest health issues leads to like songbird declines. And we have, like Alan mentioned earlier, part of our wildlife stakeholders are the wildlife viewers. So birders are keenly interested on the health of the bird populations, and deer have been shown to have a tremendous impact on that. So I think another big one is carbon sequestration. So lately, there's been maybe the last 10 years or so, there's been a real effort legislatively and otherwise to increase carbon sequestration rates in our forests to help tackle climate change. And a lot of people are alarmed by climate change. And so that's been a real driver for this discussion on deer management, because deer are preventing the growth of these trees. So I think leveraging those things that are much more broadly understood today than maybe they were about 20 years ago or so. And likewise, this deer issue, while there's fewer deer in the state of New Jersey, pretty confidently we can say that, than there was 20 years ago. The issue has been persistent, and people's awareness of it has kind of come to a head. So we've been seeing a real resurgence with that. So I think with with both private landowners and with these municipal groups, the town councils, county parks officials, there's a lot of kind of strings that we can pull to kind of show them that deer management, however you want to do it, is really critically important. And more often than not, they're reaching out to us. We're not really having to reach out to them about it. I think with private landowners, back to that, it's a bigger issue that many people now in the state of New Jersey don't directly know a hunter. So they're, at least 2 people removed from someone who actually participates in it. So whereas it used to be, a really, really integrated tradition in our society, it's less so these days. So people don't have the frame of reference for what's normal. I like to remind people that, this is the first time in about conservatively 10,000 years that hunting has not been occurring in these places in Bergen County, in places in Essex County. This is a brand new thing where humans are not interacting with this natural resource and just driving past it on their way to work and not taking advantage of that natural resource. So it's a really new thing. It's a really unique thing. And I think people generally are interested and receptive to learning about those issues and learning about the history.
Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah. What do we got, Rich? Another 5 minutes or so. We're almost
Yeah,
to
about that.
8:30.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is looking at the comments in the chat and in the Q&A questions and the questions we received. There's such a broad range of reactions to this subject that you can see the challenge that these folks face in trying to formulate an action plan. Because as soon as you raise your hand with with any thought, there's going to be some countervailing thought coming to the surface. And I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong. I'm just saying that the broad nature of this subject and the sensitivity to it, I could just see in the comments, there's a lot of energy in there. And so I have to say, Andy, what seemed like almost like a provocative subject in the beginning only seems more provocative to me now after looking at the reactions in the comments. So I commend everybody for getting out there and throwing out their thoughts, because I have almost altered my appreciation of the different viewpoints by watching the comments. So it's very cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, why don't we, any closing thoughts, Alan? Jodi and Brian will get plenty of time to talk in a couple of months. Anything from your vantage point?
I mean, from the law enforcement side of it, and being a hunter and outdoorsman myself, I would say, the topic was to encourage hunting on these private lands. I think it's a great opportunity if you're able to give that to somebody, to allow them to hunt there. I think it's great. Obviously you want to make sure they're safe, they do things right. That's also part of our job, so we can help you with that in a way. We'll work together, and I just, I can't say enough where I've been lucky enough to have private property to hunt my entire life, and I would hope that if somebody has that option to give to somebody else, that they would do it. I think it's a great opportunity.
Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for setting aside your
Thank
Thursday
you.
night to hang out with us. We really, really appreciate it. So we
Jodi,
value.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
You're
really
welcome.
rounded out the viewpoint, and it really was great. So I thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
And Andy, thank you for co-hosting tonight. Much appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you all. Everybody have a great night.
All right. Thanks.
See you all later. Thank you.
Right.